I might actually change like some stuff because I didn't think about it enough. So S tier, most common. Okay, Fiora, Darius, Gangplank. This is very basic. Okay, Fiora is extremely good right now. She shouldn't be, but it's because of her kit, or not her kit, her numbers, not because of her kit. She shouldn't be because of her kit, but because of her numbers and how she is interacting and stuff. She ends up, it's very hard to do some stuff. She's extremely powerful in low economy situations. She's extremely powerful in 1v1. She's extremely powerful in line swap. She has a lot of versatility. Darius. Yeah, I feel like when I say Darius, and if anyone thinks that he's not S tier, I think of that like GIF that I had playing for the majority of the beginning of the stream. This. It's like, you know, this is basically how I feel when Darius isn't mentioned. I mean, if you don't think that he's S tier. Uh, so okay, and then Gangplank is pretty serious. Even though he took a little bit of hits, I don't think it's as bad as people making it seem, and I think that there is easily ways for him to get out of the laning phase, unhindered. And I think his utility, everything going for him is really powerful. A tier. Maokai, Hecarim, Garen, Olaf, Rai, Shen, Malphite. Basically, the only new additions to this list that some people might not have seen from the end days of LCS, etc., are going to be Garen because of the patch, the changes. You might see a resurrection of Rise. I think that is entirely possible, especially because of some of the other champions that end up getting picked in mid jungle, etc., and because of the flexibility. Malphite is coming in because Fiora, Darius, Gangplank, etc. Malphite is extremely powerful, and I think he was a forgotten pick. I think he's been viable for a long time. I also think because of who the AD carries are and the supports and stuff inside of this meta, I think Malphite can be extremely powerful for all of those reasons. So Malphite kind of jumps back into the meta, in my opinion. I expect to see him picked sometimes, not lacking enough to be put into the wildcard tier like some of the other champions that I've listed, and then I would just put his tier and where I think that he stands relative to other champions. But yeah. B tier, I think Rumble has fallen out quite a lot, but I don't think it's to the point where he is completely unpickable. I don't think Gnar is going to be picked when there's so many other picks, because like you look at all the other champions that can be picked here, right? If that's the case, Gnar fills a very specific role, and if that does happen, while it's not probably going to be infrequent enough to put him in wildcard status, I don't think he's that good. Jax, I think maybe should be wildcard, but I don't think he has to be wildcard. I think there's chances that he gets picked, although it's actually, no, you know what? Fuck, you're right. That basically does sound like wildcard. So we're just going to put Jax. Holy shit, that is the opposite of what is good. We're going to put Jax in wildcard, and we're just going to put him B. Irelia could be picked, although I don't think it's very likely from any of the Eastern teams, China, Korea, etc. But I think it is possible from some of the Western teams, although it is unlikely. Yeah. So, okay. So I guess that sounds exactly like what I'm saying about Jax, but I think Aurelia has a little bit more likelihood to appear if she does, and I wouldn't count her completely out. But I mean, you could almost take away all the B tiers and even some of the A tiers probably with such a healthy champion pool in top lane. So I think that's how it is. The Ho-Oh picks is I've talked to some people, and obviously almost basically no one has any intel into what's going on in the scrims and like what is happening behind the scenes and stuff. And because there's been such a hiatus, no one really knows. But I think there's a very rare possibility Trundle will show his face. And that's why it's the Ho-Oh pick. Because if you can't tell right now, obviously, S tier means, they like if it's like a graph, like strength, vitality, speed, etc. That champion is their overall stats are really strong in that area. Obviously, if we're going to compare it to League, it's going to be a lane swaps, low economy, scaling, dual, 1v1, etc. And relativity to other champions inside of the meta, whatever. Yeah. So Okay, mid, Vigar and Lulu. Now, I guess a lot of people will probably wonder about Vigar, but I think Vigar, because of how safe he is, because of how broken he is, and just because of how powerful he is and his utility and how he can be built and how fast he accelerates, I think he shuts down some of the former S tier gods of the mid lane, which were Victor and Azir. I also think that because Twisted Fate is going to rear his ugly head at Worlds quite a lot, like he commonly does, every so often Twisted Fate becomes popular again. I think Vigar fits in there too, because Vigar can control the lane against him, some ways that other champions can't. To some people that probably sounds a little bit weird, like how does Vigar control Twisted Fate, but he does. And then Lulu, I think, will show her head because of the changes to top. I think because of some of who the junglers are, and I think because of how she will fit into such a hyper-competitive format. So I think Lulu, who is normally an A or B tier mid laner for a little while, has now accelerated all the way back to being S tier, mostly because of also, again, changes to some of the former mid lane gods, like Victor, Azir, whatever. But yeah, so let's now we talk about Orianna. Orianna is always a potential pick. And because, again, some of the nerfs to other mid lane champions, and because she is very balanced mid laner, that she is the queen of mid lane, I don't think she's going anywhere. Diana, I do expect possibly comes out of some of the Eastern teams, like the Asian teams. She can definitely be picked into some matchups as a pretty fucking big counter, because she also synergizes very well with the meta right now. Varus, I kind of wanted to put Varus. You'll notice that I have him in A tier and I have him inside B tier. I don't think Varus will be picked as much as some people are expecting because of his dominance in some ways. I think Varus is a very situational pick, but I don't think that it is so situational that he gets thrown into Wildcard. Echo is a champion that I think can show his face a lot as well in mid lane. I wanted to put Echo up in top, but I don't think that he can show himself in top. I guess I didn't really talk about the wild cards in top lane, but I'll just go through all the wild cards after for every single lane. And that's pretty much that. Echo in B tier for the reasons that I just listed. LeBlanc, I don't think fits in right here. I think that she has very poor matchups against some of the other mid laners that can be picked before her, and if that's the case, then realistically LeBlanc only has utility on red side, and then it can definitely skew her pick and ban phases. Ahri, some people are talking about her publicly and stuff, and I don't know if she'll actually see play. I want to kind of throw her into wildcard, but I can see reasoning that she won't be wildcard, but I don't think that she's that strong. Again, this is sort of like the same thing that like Rumble and Gnar, etc. fall into, where you look at the champions before her, and it's kind of like why? And so there's that. Varus, again, B tier and A tier simultaneously because of the situations that he can fall into and because of how specific he is to what he has to do. He is not a versus all champion like some of the other mid laners. Anyways, Ho-Oh pick. I think Zilean can show up as a Ho-Oh pick. How likely is it? I don't think it's likely at all. Well, I mean, I guess I just said it's likely, and then I said I don't think it's likely at all. I think in theory, he can show up, and I think he is really powerful. However, I don't think people have realized it yet, and so I don't expect to see him. But if someone did realize it, then expect to see him, quite often. So that's why it's a Ho-Oh pick. Potential to show up, Lux. I think Lux can show her face right now. I think Kassadin can show his face because of some of the mid lane matchups and because of the changes to his R. I think Anivia can show her face in specific situations where you want to do different things that maybe a Azir doesn't offer or a Victor doesn't offer. And I think Brand can show his face because I think he is the new Victor. And I think as time progresses, Brand will show up and become the new mid lane god. As, everything... Well, maybe not anymore because of Vigar, but hopefully Vigar gets nerfed, but, whatever. We don't really also know what's going to happen in Season 6, so we gotta see. And this is also due to the itemization changes for AP mid laners and because of the nerfs, again, to some of the other champions. Jungle. Elise is in a class of her own. Elise can do a lot of stuff that some of the other junglers can't. She can fill many roles. She can do many, many things. And I would like to put Lee Sin S tier up here as well, but I just can't. I cannot put him S tier. He's definitely A tier, probably the very top of A tier, but he does. Elise is in a class of her own right now. Other junglers that you'll recognize seeing: Rek'Sai, Echo, Evelynn, Nidalee, Nocturne, Nunu. These are all champions that offer a lot of versatility, a lot of map control, a lot of power, a lot of early game, dynamics, and a lot of flexibility as the game progresses into the mid game and the late game. So expect to see them, of course. Maybe the one that is a little bit foreign to some people is Nocturne. I think Nocturne is extremely powerful. I think he's really misunderstood, and I think with some of the other champion picks, which are going to be coming out for top lane and mid lane at Worlds, I think Nocturne actually fits in, and I think Nocturne has now gone from being a completely alien jungle pick to someone that is actually belonging in A tier. However, Nocturne, just like Varus, is extremely specific in his role and what he does, and that's why you'll also see him in B tier. Skarner I have listed in B tier because even though I think his spires are broken, I think enough time has gone by that people have figured out how to play against it. I also think that due to some of the newest arrivals to mid lane and the new arrivals to top lane and the changes to AD carry that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 months. Now again, preface this by saying I have not watched a lot of competitive videos, but it's just going over generics and basic common stuff. But I think Skarner will not be as powerful as people are expecting, also because this is the nerf patch. This is not the Skarner God patch. Jarvan, I think, has fallen off, since his glory days. I think he does not fill the role that a lot of these other junglers that you can see before him are going to fill. And I think that, truthfully, I think AP-centric junglers, with the exception of, Nocturne and Lee Sin, are going to be a lot more potent in the entire thing. Gragas, I think, has had a huge fall from grace, not due to himself, but due to the changes of other champions. So that's why I put Gragas at B tier. Ho-Oh picks, I don't really think there is a Ho-Oh pick of jungle. I don't expect anything weird. I mean, you could always throw something in here like Shaco or something, but I think that's extremely unrealistic. I think Fiddlesticks is extremely unrealistic. I don't expect to see any of the Seda junglers like Master Yi or Kayle or Warwick or anything like that. I just think that's completely absurd. I don't think Kha'Zix is going to show up as a Ho-Oh pick. I think if any of the wildcard picks do show up in any sort of manner like Kha'Zix, it will be Rengar, not Kha'Zix. So there's that. AD carry. S tier, Vayne and Kalista. This is, Sivir has had a slight fall from grace. Some of the other champions have had a slight fall from grace. Vayne and Kalista are in a tier of their own. They have so much flexibility. They do so well relative to some of the top laners and who some of the junglers are. They do so well as well against some of the other AD carries that have had a fall from grace and stuff. Tristana is up there because not just because of herself, but again because of the relativity to the meta and because of who the other AD carries have now stepped into the meta. And this happens time and time again where certain AD carries will come in and out of the meta, not because of themselves necessarily, but because of how other champions are interacting and stuff. And that's how, stuff exists, kind of like Ring Around the Rosie. Kog'Maw has an asterisk next to him. The asterisk basically implies that if it's a Juggermore comp, which is a proactive comp, it disregards what the enemy team is doing, then he is A tier. If you throw him in randomly and it's like a pseudo Juggermore, or it's just using Kog'Maw for Kog'Maw, I think he's only B tier. Jinx, Sivir, Lucian, Ashe, Caitlyn. Caitlyn, I think, can be S tier, and given certain cases, but then again, so can every other champion in League if, you throw him into certain cases. But I think Jinx, Sivir, Lucian, Ashe, Caitlyn, etc., basically all do something very balanced, and they don't kind of swing in any one direction, nor do I think that they are consistent enough that they will be fronted in every single scenario, or have the possibility of being fronted in every single scenario. sort of like your Sangan from Yu-Gi-Oh or something, you know. So that's why I put them at B tier. C tier: Graves, Corki, Ezreal, Varus, very common AD carry champions that you're used to seeing. Whatever. Graves has had a slight fall from grace, mostly because Lucian got buffed up a little bit. Corki has had a fall from grace because the meta has changed. Some people are arguing that Corki belongs higher than C tier. I don't think so, but I could be completely wrong when Worlds comes. This is probably one of the only champion picks that I'm a little, like, I guess, opposite on, compared to some other people. Ezreal, he's not bad enough that he belongs with, like, fucking Misfortune and Urgot, but I don't expect to see him at all. If he does show up, I think it'll be extremely rare, but it's not like a wild card thing where, actually, I don't even think Ezreal should be on the list, but I'm just listing him for the sake of listing him because why the fuck not? There's only, like, 1680 carries in the game. So there's that. MF and Urgot, I don't expect to show up at all. Teemo's just on this list to add insult to injury to Quinn. E through Y tier, literally you could put a melee champion in the AD carry position, it would be more useful than Quinn. So Quinn, coming in Z tier. I don't think that she'll ever be picked, ever. Wildcard, I'll talk about it right now. I guess Mordekaiser and Draven. This is the Mordekaiser patch, or Mordekaiser is, the AD carry in this patch, but he has been nerfed a little bit, but I think he could be done. Or it could be played. I also think Mordekaiser can be picked in top and mid as a cheese, but I don't think that any of the teams have devoted any of the time to doing that or learning how to do it, so unfortunate. Draven, I think, can be picked up as a wildcard pick, because I feel like some teams can use him in very specific situations to throw teams off guard, or to just kind of show up with him against, Vayne or Kalista, or, something to just, play to their strengths, play to their forte. Imp only, Twitch, and Ho-Oh picks. I don't think there are any Ho-Oh picks. Support, S tier, Thresh, Braum, Alistar. I think that's really generic. A tier, Morgana, Janna. I think that's very generic. I think Janna has had a slight fall from grace from where she was in the spring split, summer split, across all regions. I don't think it's bad enough. I think that she's very close to being S tier. Thresh is S tier because it's Worlds. Otherwise, I would probably put Thresh at, like, A tier, and a lot of people don't understand what I mean by that, but it's something that I talk about similar to Caitlyn, that if you put all the world-class teams together, some champions have a higher tier scaling than they do as if they have the potential to be being used by bottom-tier teams of all the regions. So I think Thresh is definitely S tier. And Lee Sin sort of falls into the same problem, where I think Lee Sin definitely can be S tier, but I would feel wrong putting him with Elise. So unless I was going to make a God tier and then put Lisa in S tier and then have, a blank tier and then, all the other champion, like, whatever, I just can't do that. So there's that. B tier, I think Nautilus has had a fall from grace. I think that there's a lot of other supports. I do not think that supports will be getting banned as much. I do not think that he fits in with a lot of the other champions that are being picked, with other champions that are being picked across other roles. When I meant champions being picked, I meant in the support role. Or not the support role, AD carry role. Annie, I think, will be picked extremely situationally, but not enough to be considered a wild card. Kennen, I think, could be picked situationally by Eastern teams. I don't think that he'll be picked by Western teams too much. Shen, I think, may be picked by Western teams more than it is picked by Eastern teams. Leona just kind of falls in there as a B tier, but I think she could be picked up as A tier in some cases, but not as often as I would like. Wildcard is Soraka. I don't know if everyone has gotten their heads out of their asses and realized the absolute broken embarrassment of a champion that she is, but if there was a god tier, Soraka belongs in it. A Veigar could be B tier as a flex. That's if the mid laner and the support of the teams are able to flex Veigar, in which case Veigar definitely gains some points as being able to be a flexible champion, because that definitely adds to the champion's worth and its stats. Lulu, again, this only has to do with the flex. Bard, I think, is a wild card. I think if Bard does get picked, it is extremely situational. It will be basically team-dependent, player-dependent on if he gets used. Vel'Koz, basically the same boat as Bard. Potential to show up big is going to be Soraka here because of obvious reasons that I just stated. And the Ho-Oh picks are Zillion and Sona and Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench, I don't think people are going to pick him, but I think he is entirely viable. Sona, I think, can show up as sort of a cheese, I guess, I would say. but not a cheese in the fact that she is cheesy, but I think similar to how some champions go in and out of meta because people forgot how strong they can actually be.